Welcome to growthtofreedom.com, the show that brings you inspiration, transformation, and leadership. We're helping you connect the dots, see the blind spots, and get unstuck so you can go out and create more leads, more sales, more profits, more importantly, so you can have a bigger impact, have a bigger reach, and make a bigger contribution. Is that what you want? If that's not what you want, then go check out something else. But if it is what you want, you are going to love today's guest expert. He is someone who emanates the idea of getting anything you want. He's someone who simplifies the idea of leadership. His name is Calvin Correli. He's the founder of a company called Simplero, an integrated software platform for coaches, authors, speakers, and info marketers, maybe like you, right, where you can take your entire business and get it online in a really easy, simple way. It's not just a SaaS company that he runs. He loves to call it a LAAS company, L-A-A-S. Now, if you want to know what that stands for, you're going to have to stick around to learn why he adopted this mindset from the beginning. His mission is to help people like us realize their true identity and live a life of purpose and passion. He's got a lot of years of experience, and we're going to talk about his journey of over 17 years in business as we go today. Grab a pen, grab a piece of paper. You're going to want to jot down some notes. If you've ever wanted to learn from someone who's built a software platform, a SaaS company, entrepreneur, one of the most connected people around, I think you're going to love what Calvin has to share with you. Get this, though. His most important mission and purpose involves becoming a special advisor to the President of the United States on conscious nation building. So he's someone who lives and leads by example. That's certainly going to be evident to you as we go along. Calvin, welcome to the show. How are you?
Thank you so much, Dan. It's great to be here. I'm phenomenal. How are you doing?
The same. I've been looking forward to this interview for some time, and I want to dive right into it. So, you have a company called Simplero, software as a service, but you call it a LAAS. What is a LAAS company, and why should we care?
It's love as a service. Love as a service. So I create products that I want to have a deeper impact on people. I've actually saw this quote from Steve Jobs some years ago, and it just resonated deeply with me. And I realized that's what I've always done. It just didn't realize that he was thinking that way too. He said certain products can have the spirit of enlightenment about them that just kind of has this subtle impact on you. It transforms you a little bit as you use them, and you might not even notice it, but it just, makes you a little bit happier, a little bit lighter, a little bit it opens up some possibilities. You're like, oh, I didn't realize you could do it that way. So that's really what I love to do with my products and services, put some love into them at the heart.
And, I've gotten a chance to work with your team over the last few months. So I'm a little bit biased, and I've had a chance to look under the hood a little deeper than most and see the feedback that your clients give you. And it's evident this idea of LAAS is really, it's not just a tactic, it's a way of culture for you and your team, overall. And, bringing that passion, bringing that enlightenment. I'm curious, right? Because we've talked about your journey, right? And you're very transparent about your past and where you've been. Just to give people context so they don't just think that everything you've ever done has been like this Midas touch of success. You're a healthy guy, fit guy, great family, all these different things. Give us some context. What's been your biggest failure, or possibly your biggest mistake that you'll look back on that was one of your low points? And then what you learned from it that ideally our viewers and our listeners would get some impact from as well.
Yeah, I think so. So when I started out, I created my first business, I think in 2002. That's not even I created my first business when I was 10, but as an adult person, I created my first business in 2002 and got off to a great start. But a year or so in, I was at this place where I didn't know where I wanted to go. I was so desperate to be successful. I was like, tell me how I can be successful. I brought some friends in, some really smart people, and did this advisory board meeting. And then after, we were all done, we were drinking some beer. And then one of them looked me in the eye and was like, dude, we've been here for 3 hours. I still don't know what you want. And it was so puzzling to me because I was like, what do you mean what I want? I just want to be successful. Just tell me how to be successful. But there's this part of me that was like, I kind of know what he means. Like, and I didn't realize at that point that you were allowed to want something in business. I thought you were supposed to be like, just like cold and like unemotional and detached and just like all analytical and or systematic or left brain kind of thing in business. And so it actually kind of started a little bit of a breakdown for me, because I was like, I don't know what I want. I have no idea what I want. And I realized I can't really feel myself. And so it led to this whole journey of therapy and coaching and personal development, and eventually becoming a coach, before I had a moment 5 years later where, again, another big crisis moment, been trying to start several companies that were all based on some like clever idea, but there's no heart in it for me. It was just, again, a way to be successful. And then finally here in 2008, I sat down. Everything was falling apart around me. It was like, we just bought a house that we really, really couldn't afford, and just had a baby that wouldn't sleep, and the house wasn't done, and it was the winter, and the boiler ran out of heater oil, and I'd never had a heater that needed oil before, so I didn't know what to do, and it's like terrible. And in the midst of all of this, I just sat down. I was like, okay, I think the universe is trying to tell me now is the time for me to find out what I want. And I sat down, asked myself a bunch of questions, and what came at me was, I'm here to integrate spirituality and entrepreneurship. And so that was in 2008, and that's been the organizing principle for everything that I've done ever since. And it came out of that like low point, right? Feeling like a complete failure, not, years of not being able to feel myself, like the financial disaster at that time. And I was just, okay, if we're going down that hole, let's just go all the way down and dig up the gold. Right.
Yep.
And so glad I did.
Yeah. And I also want to tie in on this, because again, I've got a little bit more under the hood of your world than most. And not only did it show up in business, but you've often described it even in personal, right? Your health habits, speak a little bit of that too, to give people context, overweight, health habits, etc. And the transformation, like when you made this decision in 2008, like where were you personally and business? And then describe a little bit of what's happened for you as a result.
Yeah. So I was always, chubby. People would tease me with that. They called me Potato. I was like my nickname. I hated that. And like just a weak. Do you know the term soy boy?
Oh yeah.
That was me. I was a soy boy. That was me. So like just very soft, such a nice guy that like didn't have any anger. No, not me. Right. Like it was all buried deep inside. And it was a journey. So actually that awakening of integrating entrepreneurship and spirituality actually let me even further down that path. So I did a lot of like journaling and visualizing and like meditating and feeling and all these things. It wasn't actually until almost 10 years later that a mentor of mine challenged me to commit to working out. And it was like, what happened was I've been making some drawings of what I'd like my body to look like. And I had made a schedule for my week. And then he looked at me, and I had like planned to do yoga 5 or 6 days a week or something. He was like, dude, if you want the body that you say you want, then that's like, this is not going to cut it. I'm like, well, what do I need to do? He's like, you got to work out at least 8 hours a week. I'm like, are you kidding me? Like at that time, I'd worked with personal trainers, and we would meet like 2 or 3 times a week. And like, if I went to the gym 2 or 3 times, I felt pretty good about myself. And so it's just so beyond anything I'd imagined. But I was like, it took me like 10, 15 minutes. And then I was like, okay, if that's what you say, I'm just going to do that. And so from that point on, I started, I made that commitment to myself, 8 hours a week. I'd track it in a spreadsheet by the minute. If I got behind by 10 minutes or an hour or whatever, I'd have to catch it up the next week, right? So no wiggle room, no, like I was traveling, I was sick, none of that stuff, like 8 hours by the minute. And I did it. I ended up doing it for a year and a half. Now I do like 10, 11 hours a week of exercise. But for a year and a half, I was tracking in that spreadsheet, and it changed my life. In like a month, 2 months, I was a completely different person when it comes to my body. I just started feeling differently, wanting to eat different foods. And it just, like, that fear that I had of where am I going to find the time for this completely transformed, right? Like now I'm like, I wouldn't have time and I wouldn't have the capacity to do everything I'm doing. I have 4 companies right now, right? That I'm managing, leading, building, 35 people. I wouldn't have time to do that if it wasn't for my commitment there. And so that's just one piece of it. I didn't have that relationship at all with my body. Also just my relationships, I ended up divorcing the mother of my kids, which is not something that you ever want to do, right? And my kids actually live in Denmark with their mom while I live in New York City, which is also not a setup that any father wants. But that was how that worked out. And part of it was just, I grew up in a pretty dysfunctional family, and I was very committed to not recreating that, but creating a better family for my kids. And I ended up recreating all of the same dysfunctions, right? All of them, despite going into it with my eyes open. So that was a journey. I think actually being sort of thousands of miles removed from my family of origin was kind of helpful in going through that, because there's not that like constant pull of getting you back into some of those old roles.
Yep.
But I'd say that's just overcoming that family dysfunction that I grew up in and actually being able to help create healthy relationships. That's a life accomplishment right there. Most people don't do that, right? So
yes. And as you're listening
piece.
or you're watching right now, like, what are you struggling with? What are you worried about related to your health, right? Your fitness, your weight, right? Or like, what are some potential family historical past issues, childhood issues that might just be holding you back more than you think, right? And what if you could actually have a playbook to transform your life, to lead, to live, to love, to do things that matter, right? To look at your life as a love as a service, right? Legally, by the way. Legally, by the way. And the bottom line is, it can happen. And when we come back, we're going to take a deeper dive with Calvin, and he's going to reveal some of the strategies that have helped transform not only his life, but literally thousands of his clients, people just like you that might be dealing with some of these same things. Or maybe you're looking and maybe everything's great. Maybe you're looking to get to that next level too. When we come back, we're going to talk more with Calvin Correli on how to go deeper with simple leadership, the Simplero way, and how you can apply the last model in your business too. We'll be right back. More on Growth to Freedom right after this. Thanks for listening to this episode of growthtofreedom.com. Are you struggling to get a steady flow of new clients every day, or maybe hit a plateau or hit a wall in growing your business? Well, let's help you solve this problem today. Let's review your business and have a conversation. You can do that for free today at breakthroughstrategycall.com. That's breakthroughstrategycall.com. In addition, if you're looking for a simple way to implement some of what we've been talking about in today's episode, then I want to encourage you to get our free small business toolkit. You can get that at activate.breakthrough3x.com. That's activate.breakthrough3x.com. If you'd like access to the special resources and all the show notes for this special episode, make sure to visit growthtofreedom.com. Welcome back to growthtofreedom.com. Now, by the way, if you're jotting down some notes, if you want to come back to this episode, you can do that at growthtofreedom.com/295. That's growthtofreedom.com/295. If you never want to miss an episode, you can go to growthtofreedom.com/subscribe. That's growthtofreedom.com/subscribe. Now, Calvin, as you've had this, transformation, this evolution, if you will, and now you've been able to inspire and impact thousands of clients. You've got a team of 35 between your 4 different companies. It's amazing, to think where you were to where you've come from. What are a couple of the strategies that our viewers, our listeners could use or apply today to be better leaders, living their life from this perspective of them as a lass, if you will?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think the main thing that I've always been willing to do that most people aren't is just the willingness to do the work. And by that, I mean the inner work and the outer work, right? I find that there are people that are willing to take a lot of action out there, but they're not really willing to go inside and feel those things that hold them back. And I find other people that are very willing to feel all kinds of things, but usually not really go really deep. They just kind of feel the same things over and over again, but that aren't willing to take the action. And you really need both of those. Because to me, it's all about becoming a different person. Like, at the end of my life, I hope to meet myself, the person that I could have become in the mirror. And I hope that person is the person I actually did become, right? That I get to become the person that I'm here to become so that I can be of service to other people. That to me is the goal. I don't do business to make money. I do business because the business is my way of transforming and becoming and serving other people.
Yeah, it's the greatest personal growth platform, I believe, in the world outside of sports, right? Sports and business are the two most amazing platforms to do that.
Absolutely,
now, I've heard you say that identity has played a pretty critical role, not only for you, but others you've worked with. Talk about identity, the importance of that.
Yeah, there's a when it comes to identity, there's, how we see ourselves is really, really critical. And we tend to attach identity to all kinds of things, right? Like, I used to think that I was a failure and a loser. And whenever that thought came into my head, like, oh, you're such a failure, I thought that the fact that it was in my head meant that it must be true. And then I identified with it. It took me a while to realize, oh, it's just a thought that's in my head. Just because it's in there doesn't mean that there's any truth or any value to it whatsoever. But I'd be such a victim of my own thoughts in that way. And really, like, I've gotten to, I like to think of it as like every day wake up, I get to choose who I want to be today. And there's been a couple times in my life where I've been, kind of unconsciously using that. There was a time I changed schools between the first and second year in high school. And I was pretty much in the loser category in my first high school, right? It's just, again, the roles that I'd grown up playing I was always that like oddball that nobody wanted to play with and hang out with. And so in the new school, I was very deliberate. I didn't want that role. I wanted to, like, clean slate, come in, hang with the cool kids, right? And I did. One of the things I did was, like, I got to another school where everybody had, like, at my old school, it was like girls and boys had nothing to do with each other pretty much. And then in the new school, everybody had already had sex, and like, we were like just a completely different culture there. So I felt so much of an outsider that I actually invented a fake girlfriend. This like girl from my old high school that I'd been hot on, but she didn't want me. I just pretended like we were girlfriends, and was like, yeah, I miss my girlfriend. And I got some sympathy on that. So not sure I'm going to recommend that. Eventually I came clean with people, but it was just like this opportunity to reinvent myself, which is really powerful. I mentioned before, like, moving to America, again, an opportunity to reinvent myself, which I've done twice. I've also changed my name. So I don't know if you know this, Dan.
Yes.
But my given name that my parents gave me was Lars Holger Pint, which is obviously completely different. And so that was actually my wife, Nomi. She had changed her name when we met, and I was really fascinated with that because I never liked the name that my parents gave me. It always felt odd to me. And so she had worked with a numerologist, and so I was like, okay, that sounds fun. What is that? And so I consulted with one, and he gave me this like numbers and stuff and explained to me. He walked me through, like, according to the numbers, this is what your life is like currently. And I was like, yes, that sounds exactly like my life, and it's absolute crap. And it was like, here's what I suggest instead, and here's what your life would be like with those numbers. And then you work backwards from the numbers he gave me a list of names that I could choose from. And the moment he gave me that list of names, I was like, wait, So I have to actually change my name. It was like so weird. It hadn't registered for me. But one of the names on the list there was Calvin. And I just really liked it because for so many years I was really struggling, and I was like, I kept questioning, like, do I have what it takes? Like, is it even worth it for me to keep going? I don't. So in Denmark, we bicycle a lot. And for me, the metaphor is like cycling towards a stoplight, right? Do I push hard, hoping that I'll make it before it turns red? Or do I just go like, I'm not going to make it anyway, so I'm just going to coast, right? It's kind of that decision. So I was like, do I keep pushing? What if I don't have what it takes? Or do I just kind of resign and give up? And my parents at one point were like, why don't you take a job with Microsoft just for like 3 years to support your family? And I was like, do you guys even have any idea who I am? Like, Microsoft is like the last place in the world that I'd want to work for. Like, such a like brand misalignment, you know. But no, they didn't know who I was, and they're just, you know, they're just worried about me. As good parents are, right? But the one thing that really kept me going for so many years was this quote that I have printed here because it's so meaningful to me, from Calvin Coolidge. Calvin Coolidge was the 30th president of the United States. And the quote goes like this: nothing in the world can take the place of persistence. Talent will not. Nothing is more common than unsuccessful men with talent. Genius will not. Unrewarded genius is almost a proverb. Education will not. The world is full of educated derelicts. Persistence and determination alone are omnipotent. And I'd read that quote over and over again, and it kept me going. I was like, if that guy could make it to be the president of the United States, then maybe there's something to it. And I was like, I'm just going to keep going. I'm going to like, I don't know if I have talent or genius or any of those things. I figured I had something going for me, but I had no idea if I'd have what it took, but I figured at least I can have persistence. That I have control over. So yeah. And it really worked out. It really worked out.
And as you're listening or watching right now, like, what are you taking from this? Right? Have you ever found yourself in a place where you're asking yourself, you know, am I good enough? Do I have what it takes? Right? Why should I just keep running this hard? I feel like I'm running up against a wall. Or maybe I should just settle back and just take it easy, because what's the point? Right? If you've ever found yourself at that place, I hope you're inspired by what Calvin is sharing with you, and how just by making an identity shift, or the possibility of an identity shift, that you can choose today, this moment, in this moment, be inspired by him to choose what role you want to play right now. How would it shift the game for you if you could simply make that shift, right? What would happen for you? How much more freedom, peace of mind, how much more freedom would you have in your life to move away from the things you don't want and move towards the things you do, if you got clarity on what you want, right? Think about that. Now, Calvin, you know, I can't help but wonder, you know, like when you were in this moment of like questioning yourself and the doubt and so on, can you remember back at that time and like, what was the trigger? I'm curious, like, what was the trigger that actually did kind of keep you moving forward to now? I mean, like, you're impacting thousands of people, clients, you've got 30 some people working for you in these 4 different companies. Like, cause you had that critical moment where you could have just as easily tilted off, in my opinion. Yeah, we see this. We both have known a lot of people and met a lot of people that they chose that path too. So for you, what was it that tipped you over to go, what if it does work? What if I could? What if I could be more successful? Like, what was it for you?
It was a vision. It was a vision and the feeling of, you know, what it could be like, what I wanted it to be like, right? That picture of good health, good relationship, successful business, that vision really drove me forward. I mean, I was so out of it that I would look at a balcony and think that looks really delicious, like something I would jump out of. Like, I wasn't where I would really do it, but damn, the thought was in my head, right? A lot. I was not in a good place. I had this notion in my head that you had to be like a billionaire by the age of 30, or you might as well just go kill yourself. Like I shouldn't be breathing the air that other more worthy people should be breathing. I shouldn't be taking up the space. That's how low my self-worth was. And it was, but I had this vision. I had this something inside of me that could feel that it could be differently. And I was like, I'm gonna keep trying. I think there's a dissatisfaction, right? A lack. I wasn't gonna settle. And I think that it's something that I see a lot with people, that they get to a certain level and then they're like, yeah, it's good enough. And then they settle and let go, there. I see it even with like big name, spiritual teachers and other people where you're like, you've overcome a lot and struggled a lot. And then they're like, okay, here, this is it. I'm done. Right. Maybe I'll get to that point at one day where I'm like, yeah, this is fine. Like I've sorted out enough areas of my life, but I kind of think I like to believe that like at age 80, I'd be like, how does this thing work? And then like tackle a whole new area. Right. Who knows, but that's kind of how I go. Yeah. Like, even like a few years ago, I started singing, right? I played piano and jazz piano, but I'd never really sung before. And then I got into singing and songwriting and music production and that whole thing, right? It's like, always so many things to explore and learn. It's super fun. I love life. I love the world. It's fun.
It's obvious. It's apparent that you do. And what's neat is you've got the business, you've created a business as a vehicle to help give you the ability to basically be in this, I'll call it a Play-Doh fun factory of life, to explore, to be curious, to learn, to grow, right? And as you're listening or watching right now, like, what if it could work for you? What if the only main thing was to stay persistent to the idea of growth, of being better today than you were yesterday, to be better tomorrow than you were today? Not compare yourself to others, right? And the air that others are breathing that might be doing better than you at this moment, but to you yesterday. Like, what would that be worth? And how would that start to shift your identity, your self-worth, and a whole lot more? So Calvin, I'm curious, you not only work really hard on yourself, this inner game of you, right? It's also shown up in your outer world. You now coach others on how to get breakthroughs, how to get amazing transformations, how to get results, not only personally, but also professionally in their business. Like, what advice would you give to someone maybe that in the mirror maybe have a lot of similarities to you, right? What advice would you give? What would be a couple action steps you would guide you, 10, 15 years ago? Hey, here are a couple steps that you can take to completely transform you immediately. What would those be?
The main thing is you have to know what you want. That's something most people are just not very clear. They're much better at what they don't want.
Yes.
But get that step of getting clarity around what you actually want and getting all of you on board, because it's easy to want some things, but then, there are other things that come with the territory, right? If you're going to be very visible or famous, well, then like that has its own price, right? Are you okay with that? Or, responsibility, right? I have 35 people that's a lot of mouths to feed, right? And they have families too, right? So that's a lot of responsibility. Are you okay with that? It's also just, a lot to manage. And so like really getting clear on what you want. And a key thing for me throughout this has also been that willingness to invest in myself, whether that's the time that I put into it or books that I buy or read or courses. I did the math on last year. I invested over $300,000 in my own personal growth, $300,000 legit over the course of 1 year. That like really getting in the habit of saying yes to those invitations, those growth choices, whatever they are, conferences, coaching programs, books, mentorships, etc. It's been game changing for me, right? Like I've always been pretty good about this, but then I'd be like, not right now, and I can't quite afford it, and like holding that, and then like letting, I felt drawn, but then let that voice get the better of me, right? Yeah, it's the responsible thing to say no to this thing, right? And I'm like, responsible how? To whom, right? Like, so there's some big things there that I regret, where I just knew that I should have said yes to that opportunity and I didn't. And I regret that. It's life, right? But
Yep.
you learn from it. But I feel like the universe, the life is always showing us the opportunity, and it can be big or small or whatever it is, but it's always presenting us with that option and saying yes, just saying yes every time it does that. It's a big.
And as you're watching or listening right now, like, what if you said yes to the opportunities that came your way? A good friend of mine, Joe Paulo, says, life gives to the givers and takes from the takers. What if really your future success just depended on you giving to you, meaning giving you the ability to grow, right? If you invest in you, the universe will invest back in you. And it's amazing that when you meet a lot of the most successful people, you'll hear this over and over and over again. Yet, Kelvin, you and I both see it and have talked about it. And people go, well, I'll invest in me when I can afford it. And yet you talk to the most successful people and they did it it was a habit. Just like investing money is a habit. When you don't have a lot of it, you start small and you start building up this muscle, so to speak, of investing in yourself. What would you say to someone that might be going up against that mindset right now, questioning, well, okay, well, I can buy into that, but I'll do it when I have it versus where you are?
I think we're always presented with opportunities and invitations. I like to think of them as invitations to that are just beyond our level, right? Because the whole point is expanding our capacity. I think our success, our feeling of love and well-being and joy, all the positive feelings, abundance and prosperity, all those things are just a reflection of how much we're able to contain, really. Like, how happy are we willing to allow ourselves to be? I used to have this rule that, like, unconsciously, that sort of like antibodies against happiness, that I could sit and be really happy, and then someone was like, oh, you're really happy today, and then instantly I'd go unhappy, because I had, like, my conscious mind couldn't have the happiness. Like, no, you're not allowed to be happy. There's like, I had like ingrained in me that if I was too happy as a kid, my dad would get really upset with me, right? He would get angry. And so it was like, oh, it's just sitting in my body to not be too happy, unless I didn't notice, in which case it was okay, right? So I think is that like, the stretching is in just like putting down that kind of money. Last day I put down 45,000 for a week on Necker Island with our common friend Yannick Silver. And that was a lot of money, right? That was a lot of money for me. But it's part of just saying, yes, I am the kind of person that is worth putting down $45,000 to go to Necker for a week and have that experience and give myself that experience. And it was a game-changing experience for me. And not for any of the reasons that you might think. It wasn't because I met Richard Branson or any of that stuff, right? It was all the little things that happened in between, such as, for example, being stuck on an island with like 35 strangers and feeling like really uncomfortable and like, do I belong here? And like all kinds of like, elementary school, like emotional stuff came up for me, because like, when is the last time that most of us have been stuck on an island with 35 strangers, right? It's not something that we do on a regular basis. So, and sharing a room with someone too, right? So definitely brought up a lot of emotion. And that, I grew a lot from that. Like, that really sparked a whole new version of me that was more comfortable with other people. That wasn't in Yannick's sales pitch for the trip to Mecca, right? But that's how, like, we think that we have to figure out how this investment in ourselves, how this invitation that we say yes to, how it's going to pay off. But we can't know, because the universe got his own plan, right? Like at this point for me, even trying to figure it out is beside the point. It's just, do I feel called to it? If I feel called to it, boom, do it. We're doing it. And I know that somehow it's gonna turn out like it was super valuable, but I don't know how yet.
And speaking of not knowing how, I mean, you do coaching for small business owners, coaches, authors, speakers, right? Information publishers, where you can help them get clarity on, what do they want? Help them, really tune in on their business to have the outer game of their business reflect them as the inner game, culture and leadership and a whole lot more. If people want to go deeper with you, Calvin, where can they connect with you? Where can they learn more about what you're up to, and also the ability potentially, if it's a right fit, to have you coach them, in that type of scenario?
Yeah. Go to my website, which is calvincorreli.com. And if you look at the bottom of that page, actually we'll go to calvincorreli.com/freedom. And then we'll have there's a short ebook that I wrote. It's called How to Get Anything You Want Without Trying Too Hard. And it's really about, like, I see a lot of people that they want this thing, but because they don't have real clarity about what they want, and because they don't include this identity piece and this inner piece, they end up trying really hard, but not actually getting there. And so that's what this short PDF is designed to just help sort all that stuff out for you very, very easily.
So I want to encourage you, if you're looking for a way to have your inner game match your outer game, right? And not to be at a place, and because maybe you're already successful, maybe you're at a place that's successful, but maybe you feel like something's missing. Maybe you feel like, is there more? Or maybe you feel a little empty, right? Unfulfilled at some degree, right? Or your business is struggling and you're looking to match up. He brought up an interesting framework. Calvin brought up an idea of inner peace. Well, the inner peace and the outer peace, when you get it right, creates an inner peace that creates an outer peace, right? And we'll have this in the show notes so you get the idea of the difference between the pieces, all four pieces I just described. But if you want to go deeper with Calvin, learn more about his leadership style, how he can help you, whether it's one-on-one, take the first step by going and get this book, How to Get Anything You Want Without Trying Too Hard, right? Go to Calvin Correli, that's CORRELI.com, calvincorreli.com/freedom. Get the book. And then if you want to go deeper and you want to learn how Calvin might be able to work with you one-on-one, right? Obviously, it's got to be a right fit, all those sorts of things. You can reach out to his team after going through the book to be able to identify that. Go to calvincorreli.com/freedom. That's calvincorreli.com/freedom. Now, as we wind this down, Calvin, I like to get into some of the personal side of things. Can you remember being a kid, I don't know, 8, 10, 12, 14 years old, when you recognized that maybe you were a little bit different, mm-hmm. and that it was part of the trigger that kind of led you, if you can lean back on it, of what stimulated you to get into entrepreneurship, or at least the idea of running your own thing or being your own boss, that sort of thing. Can you remember back to what that was?
Yeah, well, for me, it was both my parents were entrepreneurs, right? Mm-hmm. So I was kind of in that world. So in that sense, it was natural for me. My mom started a software company in 1980 and grew that to 50 people in Denmark. And even before that, we had computers in our house. So this was before the PC was invented. We had an Osborne 1
wow.
and Spectrum ZX and other computers like that. And I would always be making stuff on it. Right? One of the programs I made on the Osborne was it had this little tiny green display in the middle and then 2 floppy drives, and it was like a suitcase portable thing. And I'd write a program that would put a prompt on the screen saying, tell me what program I should write, because I'm out of ideas and I want to program something. So that was one of the things that I made. So for me, it's very much about making stuff. I want to make stuff, and if it doesn't exist, I want to make it. And I'm looking at something and I'm like, this is terrible. I can do it better. That's always been, creating things that I wish would exist in my world has always been my driver.
Who's been your biggest inspiration that you can look back on? Start as a kid. Biggest inspiration as a kid?
When it comes to entrepreneurship or in general?
In general.
In general. Well, it might be as a kid. Wow. That's good. Like the two that come to mind are Steve Jobs and Richard Branson. So getting to meet Richard was obviously special in that way. Never got to meet Steve, unfortunately. Yeah. I remember actually as a kid, it was fun. So when I was 10 or 11, my dad took me and my brother to New York City from Copenhagen, from Denmark. And I remember him telling me all about this New York real estate mogul named something Donald Trump or something. And he took us to Trump Tower. And I remember that like gold facade where it says Trump and all that stuff. So that was fun. It's like now, years later, guy's president. Yeah, I wouldn't say he was not an idol for me at that point. I didn't really know at that level.
Now you have a mission to, be a special advisor to the President of the United States, right? To create a conscious nation building model. Speak to this a little bit. Tell us about it.
Yeah, so the whole thing started in 2013 on my birthday. We were living in India, my wife and I, because we couldn't get a visa to the US. And she was like, let's go to India, do Ashtanga. I'm like, sure, what the hell is that? So we went there and did yoga for a year. And on my birthday, she asked me these questions. And what came out of my mouth was that sentence. Like, I want to be a special advisor to the president of the United States on conscious nation building. And then I was like, what does that mean? I'd never thought it before. And then I had tears in my eyes for 30 minutes. I was like in awe over this idea, and it kind of grew in me. And so I started exploring it. And since I was a kid, this is weird, but since I was a kid, I've been thinking about if I had my own country to create, if I got to create my own country from scratch, how would I do it? What would the laws be? What would the institutions be like? What would governance be like? All these things. Like, I'm a systems thinker, a design thinker, right? And so what it is that kind of clean slate thinking. Like, hey, how would we really like this thing to be if it didn't have to all the institutions that we have now and the way things are? What do we want this to be? Like, what goals do we have? What values do we have? What outcomes do we want to create? And how do we create the perfect system for that? And then how can we work forwards from where we are today to create that? So that's how I would do it as a software engineer. If I came into like a messy software product, right, and try to fix it, I'd be like, okay, forget that for a minute. What do we want it to be, right? What do we want it to be? And then figure out how to get there. So what it is kind of taking that engineering thinking and then entrepreneurial thinking, which is about how do we make stuff happen with limited resources, right? That's what we entrepreneurs do. And then also the spiritual thinking. What do we know to be the deepest truth about human beings and how we function? And we've talked a lot here about the universe and how that functions, right? If we don't design our society or with a correct understanding there in mind, it's not going to be very good. And so it's kind of my long-term project. And what I found after, so I've been sort of hanging out both on the left side of the spectrum and the right side of the spectrum. I've lived in Denmark and India and now America. So I've seen a lot of different things. And what I've come to realize is that most normal people, like 98% of people, whether they are more left or more right, we want the same things. We want people to be healthy, happy, prosperous, productive, safe. We want the economy to be good. We want the planet Earth to be healthy and thriving. Right, left or right, we all want the same things. We just disagree on how to get there. And part of the reason is we focus on what we don't want and we focus on the other, right? They don't want it. Right. Instead of like, you and I both know, like, how do you get somewhere? Well, you need to focus on what you want and then figure out how to get there, right? Big mistake that we make. But it's also because honestly, as people, we've gotten to be very immature. Like, despite all the therapy and all the self-development and all that stuff, as a society, very, very broadly, we're very immature. Like, instant gratification and like emotional at trauma and all these things. So it's kind of like a long-term project of we need to raise and elevate the maturity of the population. And that's where I think like the online marketing, right? You know, you and I both know big name online marketers and big name like coaches and stuff. So building a coalition of those people to help bring that awareness that can raise the maturity level mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually to the masses. And then once we're a little more evolved, a little more conscious in that way, turns out that all of these problems that I mentioned, they're actually pretty easy to fix. I thought it was very hard, but it's not. Like climate change, not hard. Poverty, not hard, or actually prosperity, if you want. Like safety, not that complicated, honestly. Like, all of these things are actually pretty easy to solve. We just right now can't even have a conversation about it.
And as you're listening right now or watching right now, like what would have to happen for you to be operating from a place of peace, of prosperity, of freedom, right? And you know what? When we lift awareness, what happens? It determines the difference between right and wrong, poverty and wealth, sickness and health. It determines the difference between like something that's right and something that isn't. It determines so many things that when we focus on awareness, right, we can get unity from fragmentation. We can get unified instead of being disjointed, right? Or dysfunctional, healthy instead of dysfunctional. If that's what you want, then I want to encourage you, if something here that Calvin has shared with you resonates with you, connects with you, number one, take the first step and go check out his book. You won't be sorry. You will love what he has to share with you about how to get anything you want without trying or it being so damn hard. So you can go get that right now by going to calvincorreli.com/freedom. That's calvincorreli.com/freedom. If you want to go deeper, if something here where you go, like when's the last time I met somebody who wanted to become a special advisor for conscious nation building, building companies from this last love as a service perspective? This idea of the four pieces, inner peace, outer peace, creates inner peace and outer peace, right? Chances are you've never met someone like this. And if that resonates with you a little bit, you may just want to look at working with Calvin in a one-on-one basis and have him help you transform your inner game to reflect your outer game so you can go out and make a bigger impact, have a bigger reach, make a bigger difference. If that's what you want, then go check out what he has for you at calvincorreli.com/freedom. That's calvincorreli.com/freedom. As we wrap this up, Calvin, I guess what would you hope would be 1 to 3 action steps our viewers, our listeners would take from our time today?
Number one, choose to say yes and invest in yourself, especially when it feels uncomfortable. Especially when it feels uncomfortable. Number two, be willing to go to those tender places within yourself where it's a little bit uncomfortable and hard and painful and you kind of don't want, but that's where the gold is. That willingness, that's the key differentiator. And then go take the action. Go do the things that you know that you have to do. Build the discipline and the consistency in executing on the things that you know that you have to do.
And if you're sitting here right now going, man, I would love to choose to say yes more. I would love to get real, to be able to work on my inner game, to focus on the outer game, and have a safe place where you can go to those tender places, but do it in a strong way where your self-worth, your self-esteem are safe, right? If you want help implementing some of this, any of what Calvin has shared today, then again, I encourage you, go check out what he's put together for you at calvincorreli.com/freedom. That's calvincorreli.com/freedom. Also look into the opportunity to work with him where it makes sense on a one-on-one basis. Calvin, it's been amazing to have you here with us today. What's a parting shot in this last 30 seconds or so?
Persistence. Keep at it. Keep going. You can do this. If I can do it, you can do it too. You have what it takes. Just believe in yourself. Keep going.
There you have it. Take action with what Calvin has shared with you. apply. I've got 4.5 pages of notes here. Oh, by the way, if you want to come back to this episode, you can do that at growthtofreedom.com/295. That's growthtofreedom.com/295. If you never want to miss an episode, go to growthtofreedom.com/subscribe. That's growthtofreedom.com/subscribe. Take action. Take action with what Kelvin has shared with you today, right? So much wisdom here to apply. And if you want to go deeper, check out what he's put together at kelvincorreli.com/freedom. Seize the day, make it a great week, and we'll see you next time on growthtofreedom.com. Thanks for being with us. Thanks for listening to this episode of growthtofreedom.com. Are you struggling to get a steady flow of new clients every day, or maybe hit a plateau or hit a wall in growing your business? Well, let's help you solve this problem today. Let's review your business and have a conversation. You can do that for free today at breakthroughstrategycall.com. That's breakthroughstrategycall.com. In addition, if you're looking for a simple way to implement some of what we've been talking about in today's episode, then I want to encourage you to get our free small business toolkit. You can get that at activate.breakthrough3x.com. That's activate.breakthrough3x.com. If you'd like access to the special resources and all the show notes for this special episode, make sure to visit growthtofreedom.com.